The most dangerous people are not the ones who shout. They are the ones who suddenly become silent. Rain hammered against the tall windows of Ashford House, turning the lights of downtown Boston into streaks of gold and silver. I stood across the street with my coat pulled tightly around me, trying to convince myself to keep walking. The restaurant glowed like a different world. Warm, elegant, safe. Everything my night had not been. Cars moved slowly through the storm. People hurried beneath umbrellas. Nobody looked at me twice. I preferred it that way. The less attention I attracted, the better. My hands trembled as I crossed the street. The cold had settled deep beneath my skin hours ago. My shoulders ached. My legs felt heavy. Every reflection in every window seemed to remind me how exhausted I looked. I pushed open the restaurant door and warmth immediately wrapped around me. The scent of fresh bread, roasted herbs, and expensive coffee filled the air. Soft piano music drifted through hidden speakers. Conversations floated from table to table. For a moment I simply stood there, overwhelmed by the contrast. Outside was rain and uncertainty. Inside was comfort and light. Then I noticed people staring. Not everyone. Just enough. Their eyes moved over my damp hair, my wrinkled coat, the marks I had tried so hard to hide beneath makeup and shadows. Embarrassment burned through me. I lowered my gaze and started toward the far side of the dining room. I only wanted a quiet table, a cup of coffee, an hour to breathe. Nothing more. My heartbeat refused to slow. The closer I moved through the restaurant, the more aware I became of the room around me. Crystal glasses reflected the lights above. Servers moved carefully between tables. Expensive watches flashed beneath tailored sleeves. Everyone seemed confident, certain of where they belonged. I felt like the only person there carrying a storm inside. Halfway across the dining room, dizziness swept over me. I reached for the back of a chair to steady myself. The movement drew more attention than I wanted. Several conversations stopped. I heard the scrape of a chair somewhere nearby. My breathing became uneven. Keep moving, Emma. Just keep moving. Then the room changed. It happened so quickly I almost missed it. A wave of silence spread through the restaurant. Not complete silence. More like a sudden pause. A collective awareness. Confused, I lifted my head. People were no longer looking at me. They were looking past me, toward the private dining section near the windows. I followed their gaze. A man sat alone at a corner table overlooking the rain-soaked city. Dark suit. Calm posture. A glass of water untouched beside him. He did not look intimidating at first glance. Yet something about him commanded the room without effort. Dominic Ashford. I knew the name. Everyone in Boston knew the name. Stories followed him everywhere. Some called him a businessman. Others called him something else. What mattered was the way people reacted when he entered a room. Or in this case, when he simply looked up. His eyes met mine. The noise of the restaurant seemed to disappear. He noticed everything. The exhaustion. The fear. The things I was trying desperately to hide. His expression never changed. He did not look shocked. He did not look angry. He simply became very still. Then Dominic Ashford went completely silent, and somehow that frightened the entire room more than words ever could. When someone powerful notices your pain, the frightening part is not what they say. It is what they choose not to say. I stood frozen in the middle of the dining room while Dominic Ashford watched me from across the restaurant. The silence around him felt almost physical. Conversations had stopped. Servers stood still. Even the piano music seemed distant. Then Dominic slowly rose from his chair. Nobody spoke. Nobody questioned him. The entire room simply adjusted to his movement, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My pulse quickened. Every instinct told me to leave. To turn around and disappear back into the rain before anyone could ask questions I did not want to answer. I took a step toward the exit. The room tilted slightly. Exhaustion swept through me again. Before I could steady myself, a chair appeared beside me. One of the restaurant employees had quietly moved it into place. "Please sit down," he said gently. I shook my head. "I am fine." The words sounded weak even to me. Across the room, Dominic continued watching. Not judging. Not interrogating. Watching. That somehow felt worse. I lowered myself into the chair, mostly because my legs no longer trusted me. A glass of water appeared beside my hand. Then another employee offered a clean towel. Nobody asked questions. Nobody stared. It felt coordinated. Intentional. As though one silent look from Dominic had set everything into motion. Several minutes later, the manager approached. "Miss Collins," he said carefully, surprising me by knowing my name. "Mr. Ashford would like to speak with you upstairs." Anxiety tightened in my chest. "Why?" The manager glanced toward Dominic. "You would have to ask him." I looked across the restaurant again. Dominic had returned to his seat. He was not watching me now. He was looking out the window at the rain. Somehow that made me even more curious. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The elevator ride felt much longer than it actually was. When the doors opened, I found myself standing inside a private floor overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Boston glowing beneath the storm clouds. Dark wood shelves lined the walls. Everything felt elegant without trying too hard. The office looked exactly like the man who owned it. Controlled. Quiet. Intentional. Dominic stood near the windows with his back partially turned. He did not immediately speak when I entered. Instead, he waited until the door closed behind me. Then he motioned toward a chair. "Sit." His voice was calm. Not demanding. Simply certain. I sat. A warm cup of tea rested on the desk between us. The smell of chamomile drifted upward. Dominic finally looked directly at me. His eyes were steady. Observant. The kind of eyes that missed very little. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he noticed my hands gripping the edge of the chair. He noticed the way I kept glancing toward the door. He noticed the fear I thought I had hidden. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than I expected. "Emma." Hearing my name from him sent a strange chill through me. "Who made you afraid to ask for help?" Some questions are dangerous because they force you to tell the truth. I sat across from Dominic Ashford and stared into the steam rising from the untouched cup of tea. His question lingered between us. "Who made you afraid to ask for help?" I wanted to answer. Part of me desperately wanted to tell someone everything. The fear. The confusion. The constant feeling that someone was watching. Yet another part of me had spent weeks learning that silence felt safer than honesty. I lowered my eyes. Nobody. The lie sounded weak the moment it left my mouth. Dominic noticed. Of course he noticed. He leaned back slightly in his chair but did not challenge me. He simply waited. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows overlooking the city. Finally, I reached for my phone resting inside my coat pocket. "I am just tired." Dominic's gaze followed the movement. The moment the screen lit up, my stomach tightened. Another message. Unknown number. My heartbeat quickened immediately. I tried to lock the screen before he could see it. Too late. The words were already visible. "You should have stayed quiet." The room suddenly felt colder. Dominic's expression remained calm, but something changed in his eyes. Not anger. Focus. The kind of focus people develop when they recognize a problem. "How many messages?" he asked. I looked away. "It does not matter." "It matters." His voice remained steady. I swallowed hard. 3 weeks. The answer surprised even me. Saying it out loud made everything feel more real. Dominic held out his hand. "May I?" I hesitated before giving him the phone. He reviewed the message history carefully. One after another. Different numbers. Similar wording. Similar tone. Every message carried the same unsettling theme. Stay quiet. Stop asking questions. Leave it alone. Dominic returned the phone without comment. "Why did you not report this?" I laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. "Report what?" "Anonymous messages." He studied me for a moment. Fair point. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then another memory surfaced unexpectedly. I remembered the first message arriving shortly after I cleaned out several boxes belonging to my father. At the time, I assumed it was random. Now I was not so sure. "My father left me some things," I said quietly. Dominic looked up immediately. "What kind of things?" "Old papers. Photographs. Personal belongings." The room grew still. Anything unusual? I thought carefully. Most of the boxes contained ordinary items. Family photographs, receipts, old books. Then I remembered something. There was a small envelope. Dominic leaned forward slightly. And it disappeared. His expression sharpened. When? About a month ago. The realization hit me all over again. At the time, I believed I had misplaced it. Now that explanation seemed impossible. Dominic stood and walked toward the windows. The city lights reflected against the glass. Emma. His voice was quieter now. I do not think these messages are random. My pulse quickened. Neither do I. He nodded once. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen before answering. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. When it ended, he remained staring out at the rain-soaked city below. What happened? I asked. Dominic slowly turned toward me. Someone has been sitting outside your apartment building for the past 4 nights. My breath caught. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. And tonight, they followed you to my restaurant. The moment you realize someone has been watching you, every memory begins to look different. I stared at Dominic while his words echoed through my mind. Someone had been outside my apartment. Someone had followed me to the restaurant. Suddenly, every uneasy feeling from the past few weeks felt justified. Every glance over my shoulder. Every shadow lingering too long. Every anonymous message. None of it had been my imagination. Dominic returned his phone to the desk and studied me carefully. Think back, he said. What changed before the messages started? I wanted to answer immediately, but the truth was not simple. My father's death had left behind dozens of loose ends. Boxes. Documents. Personal belongings I had avoided sorting through for months. After a long silence, I finally spoke. There was one thing. Dominic waited. A locket. His expression remained calm. Tell me. I reached beneath my sweater and pulled a thin silver chain into view. A small oval locket rested against my palm. The metal was worn from years of handling. My father had given it to me when I was 18. I had worn it almost every day since. I found something inside it recently. Dominic leaned forward slightly. What? Carefully, I opened the locket. Hidden behind an old family photograph was a folded piece of paper no larger than a postage stamp. I had discovered it only 2 weeks earlier while cleaning the locket. At the time, I assumed it was meaningless. Now I was no longer sure. Dominic accepted the tiny paper and unfolded it beneath the desk lamp. Several faded words appeared. A company name. An address. Nothing else. The moment he read it, something changed. His eyes narrowed slightly. Where did you get this? Inside the locket. He looked at the paper again. Then toward the rain-covered windows. The silence returned. Not the uncomfortable silence from earlier. This one felt heavier. More dangerous. You know it, I said. It was not a question. Dominic slowly nodded. Yes. My pulse quickened. What is it? He placed the paper on the desk between us. A company that no longer exists. That does not explain your reaction. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly. Because 20 years ago, that company handled financial records for several powerful people. The room suddenly felt smaller. Including the person sending the messages? Possibly. He paused. Including someone else I know. The answer unsettled me. Dominic rarely spoke about himself. The fact that he volunteered even that much told me this mattered. I looked again at the faded address. It meant nothing to me. Yet somehow it had survived inside my locket for years. Hidden by my father. Protected. Preserved. Why would he leave this for me? I whispered. Dominic's gaze remained fixed on the paper. Because he wanted you to find it when the time was right. Before I could respond, a notification appeared on my phone. Unknown number. My heart immediately sank. Hands trembling, I opened the message. This time there were no warnings. No threats. No demands. Only a photograph. An old photograph. My father standing beside a man I had never seen before. On the back wall behind them hung the same company logo printed on the paper from my locket. Beneath the image, a single sentence appeared. Ask Dominic Ashford about Raymond Cross. Some names do not need an explanation. The reaction they create tells you everything. I stared at the message on my phone while rain continued sliding down the windows behind Dominic. Ask Dominic Ashford about Raymond Cross. The moment I looked up, I knew he recognized the name. His expression had not changed much, but after hours of watching him, I had learned to notice the smallest details. The silence lasted several seconds. "You know him," I said quietly. Dominic lowered his gaze to the photograph on my screen. "Yes." My heartbeat quickened. "Who is he?" Dominic walked toward the windows overlooking Boston. The city lights shimmered through the rain. For a moment he seemed less like the powerful man everyone feared and more like someone revisiting a memory he never wanted to see again. Years ago, Raymond Cross was someone I trusted. The answer surprised me. "Trusted?" Dominic nodded. "A long time ago." Something about the way he said it told me the story ended badly. I stood and joined him near the windows. Was he connected to my father? Dominic remained silent before answering. "I believe so." My pulse raced. Every answer seemed to uncover 3 new questions. "Then tell me what happened." He looked at the photograph again. Raymond handled financial operations for several companies. He knew where records were stored. He knew who owned them. He knew which secrets mattered. I remembered the company name hidden inside my locket. Suddenly it all felt connected. And then, Dominic folded his arms. Then one day he disappeared. The room grew still. Disappeared. Without warning. His voice remained calm. People looked for him. Nobody found him. A chill moved through me. The man in the photograph standing beside my father was not just part of an old memory. He was a missing piece of whatever mystery had followed me into the present. Before I could ask another question, my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. My stomach tightened immediately. The message contained only an address. No explanation. No signature. Just an address. I stared at it for several seconds before realizing I recognized it. The clinic. Dominic looked at the screen. "What clinic?" "The community clinic where I work." Anxiety settled heavily in my chest. "Why would they send me that?" Dominic studied the address. Then his expression sharpened. "When was the last time you visited the basement?" I frowned. The basement. Storage rooms. Maintenance areas. Old records. I thought carefully. "Months ago." Dominic nodded slowly. "Interesting." The word did nothing to calm me. "What are you thinking?" He glanced toward the photograph again. Then toward the address. "I think your father wanted something hidden." My pulse quickened. "At the clinic?" "Possibly." Suddenly a memory surfaced. Several years earlier, my father had volunteered during a renovation project at the building. He spent weeks there after work. At the time, I never questioned it. Now I wondered if that had been a mistake. Dominic seemed to reach the same conclusion. "Tomorrow morning," he said quietly, "we are going to your clinic." I looked at the rain-covered city beyond the glass. For the first time, I felt as though I was standing on the edge of something enormous. Then Dominic's phone rang. He answered immediately. The conversation lasted less than 20 seconds. When it ended, he became very still. "What happened?" I asked. His eyes met mine. "Someone just entered your apartment." The moment a stranger enters your home, every object you own begins to feel different. I stared at Dominic after he ended the call. The office suddenly felt smaller. The rain outside no longer sounded comforting. It sounded distant. "What do you mean someone entered my apartment?" My voice barely sounded like my own. Dominic picked up his coat from the chair. "My people have been watching the building since you arrived here." My heartbeat accelerated. "And?" "A man entered 20 minutes ago." He remained calm. "He used a key." That detail unsettled me even more. Whoever had gone inside wanted access without attracting attention. Nothing about this felt random anymore. We left the office minutes later. The drive across Boston seemed endless. Streetlights reflected across rain-soaked pavement. I sat silently beside Dominic while dozens of possibilities raced through my mind. By the time we arrived, 2 members of his security team were already waiting outside the building. The hallway leading to my apartment looked completely normal. The familiar carpet. The same dim lighting. The same quiet atmosphere. Yet the moment I stepped inside my apartment, I knew something had changed. Nothing was destroyed. Nothing appeared missing. But someone had been searching. Books sat in different places. A kitchen drawer remained slightly open. A chair near the window had been moved several inches. Tiny changes. Deliberate changes. The kind meant to be noticed. Dominic slowly surveyed the room. His eyes moved carefully from object to object. Then he stopped beside a bookshelf. What was here? I walked over. A small framed photograph of my father rested on the shelf. Beneath it was an empty space. My stomach tightened immediately. The envelope. Dominic looked at me. The one that disappeared? I nodded. I kept a copy of an old note there. A strange realization hit me. If someone came searching tonight, they had not found what they wanted. Otherwise, they would not have disturbed the apartment again. Dominic seemed to reach the same conclusion. He walked toward the living room window and looked outside. They are getting impatient. The words sent a chill through me. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I froze. Another message appeared. This one contained no threats. No demands. Only a photograph. I opened it slowly. The image showed the basement of the community clinic where I worked. My pulse quickened immediately. In the corner of the photograph stood an old storage cabinet I recognized. I had walked past it hundreds of times. Beneath the image appeared a single sentence. Look beneath the floor. Dominic read the message over my shoulder. Silence filled the apartment. Then something unexpected happened. A memory surfaced. Several years earlier, my father had volunteered during renovations at the clinic. I remembered him spending hours in the basement after everyone else had gone home. At the time, I thought he was helping repair water damage. Now the memory felt completely different. The basement, I whispered. Dominic turned toward me. What about it? My heartbeat raced. There is one section of flooring that never matched the rest. For the first time that night, a faint expression crossed Dominic's face. Not a smile. Recognition. Then tomorrow, he said quietly, we stop looking at the clues. He glanced toward the mysterious photograph on my phone. And we find whatever your father wanted hidden. Sometimes the answers you spend years searching for are hidden beneath your feet the entire time. The next morning arrived cold and gray. Low clouds hung over Boston as Dominic and I drove toward the community clinic. The streets were quiet. Commuters hurried along sidewalks carrying coffee cups and umbrellas. Everything looked normal. Yet my pulse had not slowed since leaving my apartment. The photograph. The messages. The uneven section of flooring in the basement. Every clue seemed to be pulling us toward the same place. We entered through a side entrance shortly after opening hours. Most of the staff had not arrived yet. The familiar hallways felt strangely different now. For years this building had represented stability, routine, safety. Today it felt like a puzzle hiding secrets inside its walls. Dominic walked beside me without speaking. He never rushed me, never pressured me. His presence alone somehow made it easier to keep moving forward. We reached the basement several minutes later. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Storage shelves lined the walls. Old medical supplies occupied metal cabinets. Everything appeared exactly as I remembered. Then I saw it. The section of flooring near the back corner. Slightly darker than the surrounding surface. Slightly newer. Easy to miss unless you already knew it was there. My father had spent weeks working in this room years ago. Suddenly I understood why. Dominic crouched beside the flooring and examined the edges carefully. You were right. My heartbeat quickened. You see it too? He nodded. This section was replaced. A maintenance worker arrived a few minutes later with tools. The process took less than 20 minutes. Yet every second felt endless. I stood beside Dominic while the loose flooring was carefully lifted. Dust filled the air. Old wood creaked. Then something appeared beneath the surface. A small metal lockbox. My breath caught instantly. Nobody spoke. The maintenance worker stepped back. Dominic carefully lifted the box onto a nearby table. It was old. Scratched. Plain. Yet somehow it felt more important than anything I had ever seen. Open it, Dominic said quietly. My hands trembled as I released the latch. The lid lifted with a soft metallic click. Inside were folders, photographs, financial records, several handwritten notebooks, years of preserved information. Near the top rested a sealed envelope with my name written across the front in my father's handwriting. For a moment, I could not breathe. Seeing those familiar letters felt like hearing his voice again after years of silence. Carefully, I opened the envelope and unfolded the pages inside. The first line immediately brought tears to my eyes. "Emma, if you found this, then the truth finally reached you." I read every word slowly. My father explained how he discovered financial records connected to Raymond Cross and several business partners. He explained why he hid copies, why he never stopped documenting what he found. Most importantly, he explained why he trusted nobody. My hands trembled as I reached the final page. There, beneath his signature, was one final paragraph. I read it twice before looking up at Dominic. "What is it?" he asked. My voice barely worked. My father knew who helped Raymond. Silence filled the basement. Dominic studied my expression carefully. "Who?" I lowered the letter slowly. The name written on the page was one I recognized immediately. One connected directly to Dominic's organization. One connected to Ashford House itself. The truth becomes heavier when it points toward someone standing beside you. The basement felt strangely quiet after I spoke the name aloud. Dust drifted through the fluorescent light above us. My father's letter trembled in my hands. Dominic remained motionless for several seconds. Not shocked. Not angry. Thinking. The name written on the page belonged to Ethan Mercer, the operations manager of Ashford House. My stomach tightened immediately. Ethan had worked for Dominic for years. I had met him briefly on my first night at the restaurant. Calm. Professional. Forgettable in the way trustworthy people often seemed. Yet, according to my father's records, Ethan had maintained contact with Raymond Cross long after Raymond disappeared. "Are you sure?" Dominic asked quietly. I handed him the letter. My father was. Dominic read every page carefully. The longer he read, the quieter he became. That silence worried me more than any reaction would have. Eventually, he closed the folder and looked toward the lockbox. "Take everything." Within an hour, every document had been transported to a secure office above Ashford House. The rain had finally stopped outside. Gray sunlight filtered across the city. Yet, despite the brighter sky, I felt as though the shadows around this mystery had only grown deeper. Dominic and I spent the afternoon reviewing records. Financial statements, correspondence, transaction logs, notes written in my father's handwriting. Piece by piece, a picture began to emerge. Raymond Cross had not disappeared randomly. He had vanished shortly after discovering information connected to several hidden financial accounts. My father learned the same truth years later. Instead of exposing it immediately, he copied everything and hid the evidence. The more we read, the more one detail repeated itself. Ethan's name. Not everywhere. Just enough. Small references. Meeting schedules. Contact numbers. Account approvals. Tiny pieces that formed a larger pattern. My phone remained silent for the first time in weeks. No anonymous messages. No photographs. No warnings. The absence felt almost unnatural. As evening approached, Dominic stood near the office window overlooking Boston Harbor. "Someone wanted you to find those documents," he said. I looked up from the files. "The person sending the messages?" He nodded. "They guided you to the clinic. They guided you to the lockbox." The realization settled heavily in my chest. Whoever had been watching me was not simply threatening me. They were directing me, leading me toward the truth. "Why not reveal themselves?" I asked. Dominic folded his arms. "Because they are afraid." Before I could respond, a knock sounded at the office door. One of Dominic's security staff entered holding a sealed envelope. "This arrived downstairs 20 minutes ago." Dominic accepted it. No return address. No identifying marks. The envelope contained a single flash drive and a handwritten note. I immediately recognized the handwriting. It matched the anonymous messages. Dominic read the note silently before handing it to me. The message contained only one sentence. "You are looking at the wrong man." My pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" Dominic inserted the flash drive into his computer. Several video files appeared. Security footage. Dates. Locations. Meetings. One file opened automatically. The timestamp showed 6 months earlier. My breath caught instantly. The footage revealed Raymond Cross sitting across from someone inside a private restaurant dining room. Not Ethan Mercer. Not anyone I recognized. Dominic stared at the screen. For the second time since I met him, he became completely silent. Then he spoke a name I had never heard before. Michael Voss. The final piece of the truth is rarely the loudest. Sometimes it arrives as a name spoken in a quiet room. I stared at the paused video on Dominic's computer screen while the name echoed in my mind. Michael Voss. I had never heard it before. Yet the reaction it produced told me everything I needed to know. Dominic remained standing beside the desk, his eyes fixed on the image. The office felt unusually still. Outside, Boston glowed beneath the fading light of evening. Who is he? I finally asked. Dominic exhaled slowly. Someone who spent years making sure nobody looked in his direction. My pulse quickened. Connected to Raymond? Very connected. Over the next several hours, the documents from the lockbox, the files on the flash drive, and my father's records were reviewed together. One by one, the pieces aligned. Michael Voss had operated behind layers of companies and partnerships. Raymond Cross had discovered financial activity he was never supposed to find. My father had later uncovered the same trail. The anonymous messages suddenly made sense. Someone had been trying to guide me toward the evidence before it disappeared forever. Not to frighten me. To help me. Near midnight, Dominic received a call. He listened quietly before ending the conversation. The source of the messages has been identified, he said. My heartbeat accelerated. Who was it? Dominic handed me a photograph. The image showed an older woman standing outside a small office building. I immediately recognized her. Linda. She had worked alongside my father years ago. I remembered her visiting our house when I was young. Dominic nodded. She found copies of your father's notes after his death. She spent years protecting them. Emotion tightened my throat. Suddenly the messages felt different. The photographs. The clues. The directions. Someone had been keeping a promise. The following week moved quickly. Attorneys reviewed records. Investigators verified documents. Financial files were authenticated. Every piece of evidence supported the same conclusion. The truth my father spent years protecting was finally impossible to ignore. For the first time since this began, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Not because every question had been answered. Because I no longer carried them alone. Several days later, I stood beside the harbor just after sunrise. The water reflected pale gold beneath the morning sky. Cold air drifted across the docks. The city seemed calmer than I remembered. Or maybe I had changed. Footsteps approached behind me. I smiled before turning around. Dominic. He stopped beside me and looked out across the water. Neither of us spoke immediately. The silence felt comfortable now. Familiar. My father would have liked you, I said quietly. Dominic glanced toward me. You think so? I nodded. He respected people who protected others. For a moment, Dominic looked away toward the horizon. Your father protected you. Emotion rose unexpectedly in my chest. He did. We stood there watching the sunrise. The fear that followed me for weeks was finally gone. The messages had stopped. The secrets were no longer buried. The truth had survived. And so had I. After a long silence, Dominic spoke. You walked into my restaurant during the worst week of your life. I laughed softly. That sounds about right. A faint smile appeared on his face. Then perhaps something good should come from it. The morning light spread across the harbor as we stood side by side. And for the first time since this journey began, the future no longer felt uncertain. It felt open.